No, that you're incorrect.
Sorry. Okay.
My data with the gap, the level of resumption after the gap is on the order of a thousandth or smaller part.
Okay. It's just I thought I was reading the good news is that the planet is not at risk from any events manifesting in 2012 or beyond. Repeat, the planet is not at risk.
Yeah, the planet isn't at risk. The Earth will still be there, but not necessarily humans.
Sure, okay, with you. Okay.
Sorry about that. I have a very acerbic wit, and you just need to be aware of that. I think I was being extremely sarcastic. Planet Earth will be just fine, thanks.
Yeah.
But none of the fleas, including ourselves, are likely to share that opinion.
Well, okay, thanks very much. That puts my mind at rest now. We need to start planning for the future, certainly.
It's a waste of time. Yeah, all that planning for the future, retirement, any of that? No, blow it off.
Definitely, yeah. So, did I mention Terra entity? Aye.
Yeah, the Terra entity. Okay, basically what I did when I first started getting back the data, it was in just such huge volumes, we're talking tens of millions of words, that I had to start sorting them out into larger groups around certain archetypes. And so I sliced and diced the data to produce what I called entities, and one of the entities that naturally seemed to fall out was around the planet underneath our feet. And so I just named that the Terra entity, and did a lot of my programming in Latin, and I've studied Latin, so I have a tendency to use Latin so to avoid certain ambiguities. But then as a spoken language, it starts also having other ambiguities. When they say terror and they're actually saying it as terra, we've got issues.
Yeah. The planet has got issues. Am I right in saying that the process that you used predicted the oil spill, the BP oil spill?
Yeah, yes, it came back for us as a descriptor about a year in advance of an oil volcano with radioactivity associated with it. And I thought, see, here's the problem. My data comes back and we've got a really good handle on something at a high archetype level. We knew there was going to be some kind of disruption with oil that was going to resemble a volcano, that was going to be the focus of everybody's attention for months, and that was going to cause certain problems, and then it was going to flow towards the southeast relative to where I am, because that's where all the directions are. And we had a number of these archetypes correct. But the problem is that we started an archetype, we're starting at like the top of the pyramid, and all of the good juicy stuff is in the detail layers down at the bottom. But that the detail layers are just so chock full of stuff, most of it erroneous or redundant or irrelevant, that we frequently pick it wrong. So here we are in the vast chaos of human civilization. We've got this ongoing problem between the Israelis and the Iranians being foisted on us by the powers that be, the corporate masters. And so I had erroneously assigned the oil volcano because they were temporally associated, temporally linked. I had erroneously assigned it as one of the results to arise as a result of the Israelis attacking the Iranians. So we had a lot of the details accurate about it, but in going through, getting down to that level of detail, my monkey mind, as I said, couldn't make any sense of just an oil volcano sprouting up somewhere. So it was the only way that could occur is if the Israelis somehow nuke an oil site, as part of their mistake of attacking Iran. Sure. Make sense?
Yeah, because you also talk about the U.S. military surrounding Iran as well.
Correct. And we have a number of, so see, there again is our issue, as we get to the detail level, or actually once we drop below the tertiary or that level, the third or fourth level of supporting aspects, we're starting to get into an area where you might have 20 or 30,000 words within our model space that are associated with a pretty good archetype that you think you understand. And then you've got to get a limited number of those words, those 20 or 30,000 words that are associated with it at the detail level, to get a flavor of what the forecast actually is. So, we understand now that frequently we will be quite correct at the archetype level, and we will even get an amazing prescient view of some of the language that will be emanating and actually manifesting, and I'll give an example in a second, and B, that we can be quite wrong at the detail level, off in some screwy way totally. And one of the examples that we have at an archetype level is that some time before the event, I had said that it was going to be a blue flue, and it spelled it as F-L-U-E, as in flue in a chimney. And so I was describing this whole thing within the language showing up, and the label for it was the blue flue, but that was also going to be associated with people's health, and that the people's health would be associated with plague-like conditions. And now, after all this time, the mainstream media is actually using these terms of blue flu, spelled F-L-U, as though pneumonia sickness, but now also associating it with the blue plague, and also associating all this with the Gulf states, etc. So the language itself is showing up some months after we put it out, but not exactly specifically in the way that I'd said. But like I say, we got some of these staggeringly right, and then are wrong on about half of them.
Yeah, because you talk about shaky glumps, south rises, current sea coverage, air holes and masses, blue flu, island stew, flu with an EW, and summer blues. The recent 8.8 earthquake in Chile, which was on 27th of February of this year, is one of 6 such forecasts within the data set for 2010. The Terra entity has 7 in total large damaging earthquakes forecast for 2010. The span of the earthquake is indicated to take most of the year, and further
we're still pending, I think, on 3 major damaging earthquakes between now and December, and then we'll have hit that forecast, correct. But it may be moot. It may be absolutely rubbish in terms of we may not care, because the volcanic activity may take all of our minds away from that.
Right, okay. Now,
again, by the way, all of this is tied into solar activity directly. And so we have a solar hiccup on August 1 that is such of a strange nature and magnitude that the, quote, experts are both in academia, corporate, and government are unable to label it even, let alone quantify or qualify it. And it is no surprise that we're going to get horrific and strange weather patterns. And you guys are a real example of that, having survived a 100-year or 1,000-year series of storms up there?
We get storms every day, mate.
Yeah, but you've got to admit you've had a rough winter here.
We got a rough year all round. 4 seasons in one day in Scotland, basically. I think last year summer was a Tuesday morning. And
yes, we have that same joke here. Yes, what are you going to do on summer? Well, it depends on which day it is.
Yeah, well, it was Tuesday morning last year. I think it was in July sometime, and I slept in and missed it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
definitely. Now, coming to your own massive land, that we know as America, you've kind of said that there's going to be a civil war. Can you tell us a wee bit more in detail what you think the data has been telling you about?
Well, I hate to apply the word civil to it, because here's our basic issue. There's going to be contention, so we have the war language quite well defined, and it stems from what we call the revolution metadata layer. Let me back up and say that when I first started organizing the data in this IntelliCAD, which is a 3D computer-aided design program that you can get off the internet, the data seemed to shake out not only into entities, but across the entities we would get these data streams where for instance, the Terra entity, the powers that be entity, the markets entity, the populous US of A entity, and the global pop entity all would house a subset of language that was behaving the same, and in one instance might be the word revolution, and it would would behave the same pretty much in all of these various different entities, and so we call that a metadata layer because it crosses through all of the various different entities. Within the populous US of A entity, we have this metadata layer expressing its ever so slight differences from the other entities in the contention and so on. And so we're going to certainly have that as an issue, but the Civil War is the civil component of it, the idea that it might be a naturally occurring fracture in a populace that would set one part against another. I'm going to have to start disputing because I don't think that there is a natural fracture that exists, and I think that if it comes to any kind of a warfare within the populace of the U.S., that at least some component of it will be directed by the powers that be, the corporate masters, and that they will be fomenting the divisiveness for their own purposes. There's a whole lot of contention, don't get me wrong. A lot of Americans don't like a lot of other Americans for a lot of different reasons, but there's not a cohesive natural fracture line geographically or even racially or along any line except anymore for the level of money or currency. We do have a staggering potential for class warfare within the U.S., and the powers that be usually don't tend to promote class warfare. The exception might be the 1789 French Revolution issues, but as that was actually promoted through Freemasonry, and it appears to be a more of a power shift, what we would these days call a regime change, that got out of hand than actual class warfare from its beginning, even though they attempted to use the class separation as the motivating force for the regime change. So you may, from the outside, you may see some of that developing. If so, it'll be 100% manufactured by the powers that be. But nonetheless, that's not to say that we won't have the contention and the warfare and so on. It's not to say that we won't succumb to that. But there's people like myself and others that are out there saying, basically as frequently as we can stand, get up and do it, hey guys, hang on a second, the powers that be are manipulating you. Watch this language. Look what they're telling you to do here. Watch for all this hidden programming, and they're trying to set you up. There's a huge war coming, and they want to get everybody fractured this way and that, and then let you all loose on each other so they can step back and reap the rewards.
Well, as we were discussing off air, there was a kind of rally, a big meet-up in America just the other day there, by a few thousand people, if I'm not mistaken, who were basically wanting to take the power back.
Yeah, and the problem is this, from my viewpoint, you have to understand I'm not a joiner, I'm more of a loner as an individualistic individual. And so just my viewpoint, I have a tendency to have a bias on it, but nonetheless, the issue can be looked at as a level of vulnerability. Once you start having organizations, and once you start having mass crowd demonstration kind of things, then instantly you become a target of and vulnerable to the powers that be using the same strategy that they've always used, which is to insinuate themselves into your organization, take it over, subsume it, and direct it to their own needs. So, yeah, there were a whole lot of people that were legitimately showing up there to express their discontent and to attempt to take back or whatever, seize the day for their particular viewpoint. But from my viewpoint, that is not going to be effective. It's even as a demonstration, it becomes suspect anymore when we know that the power